What's up, government students? Mr. Gongora here, wishing you well. I wish you good health, and I hope that you're well. And, I just saw a news conference today with the governor saying, basically, effectively stating that we are going to be starting to open up retail businesses and other places, organizations are going to be coming back slowly in phase one of our rebound from the coronavirus epidemic and all that it's caused. So that's good news. I wanted to share that with you. That's good news today. The governor of the great state of Texas, has just announced that we are going to begin reopening local businesses, and so that's a really step in the right direction. I mean, it's going to be slow. Not every business is going to open up at once, of course, but slowly but surely, if we keep the Corona, whatever numbers, if they stay current or if they start declining, then we can start opening up businesses in mass, and that's really potentially good news. We're getting some sense of normal life back. Movie theaters, I think restaurants and things like that, things that we miss. So that's coming back, hopefully, slowly but surely. Today I wanted to talk to you about the Blast PowerPoint that I uploaded a couple of days ago. Actually, I uploaded it the week before, and I didn't give you any context. I didn't even give you an assignment over it. I just kind of uploaded it. Yesterday, I actually gave you an assignment called questions. It simply, look for it in Canvas. It just simply says questions over American political parties PowerPoint. It's a lot to say. So you'll see an assignment link that says questions about the American political parties, and it refers to that PowerPoint that I uploaded last week, and then I re-uploaded this week. It's the same PowerPoint, and I think you have like 25 questions to work on. It's almost almost breaks down to like a little packet of 25 questions related to that assignment. But they go pretty quick. They follow slide by slide by slide. So what I just want to do now is I want to kind of talk about some things on that PowerPoint. I'm going to try to do this here in about 20 minutes or so, give or take. I'm going to go through pretty much half to most of it. At the very end of the PowerPoint slides, it talks about how political elections happen in this country. And I'm not going to talk about that much. I'm going to save that for maybe next week. I'll go through the electoral cycle. But right now I want to talk to you about Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and how this all sort of came to be. And again, this is on the slides, but I want to kind of say some things that maybe aren't on the slides. But just for reference, I'm going to pull up the slides right now, the American political parties PowerPoint, and I'm going to kind of highlight some stuff from there. So if you want to follow along or read along or see where I'm getting this from, again, it's the same PowerPoint that you guys already have, but I'm going to go a little bit further. I'm going to say some stuff that's not necessarily on here. What I'm going to go over is not for a grade, or I'm not going to give you a test on this per se. This is just for your own knowledge. This is just for you to kind of, if we were having a class discussion, we could get a little bit more into it. And obviously, I can't hear back from you unless you want to leave me a message in the discussion board. Feel free to do that, or if there's a question you have, just hit me through Remind as usual. All right, guys. So if you want to kind of jump in with me, I'm referring back to the American political parties in the first slide. It talks about George Washington, how he was the first president of the United States. Obviously, you know that, but he wasn't elected through the Electoral College. He wasn't elected through a political party's system of Democrats nominating him or Republicans nominating him. He was neither, because there wasn't a political party's system around back then. We're talking 1790, I think 1790 is when he was 92. I'm sorry, when he was elected. So George Washington, first president, he actually warned against political parties. He didn't want our system of government to be controlled by a particular political faction or group. But sadly, Washington leaves office, and then you see the Democrats, the Democratic Party, forming in like the late 1790s, and around 1800 they were starting to put candidates and starting to organize. So political parties came about anyway, despite his best efforts. He did warn against them, but here we are. So the Democrats were the first party. Now, but they weren't the only ones. Obviously, the Republican Party formed a little bit later. The Whig Party was somewhere in between. And without getting too bogged into those, I want to look at like the current parties and how they, what they represent, how they came to form. So, but I'm going off the slides here. It's important for you to know that the one-party system is usually found in dictatorships. So if you look at a country like South Korea, where there is a dictatorship type of government, or something resembling that, there's really only one dominant party. They call it the People's Republic of North Korea. I'm sorry, I don't know if I said South Korea. North Korea, as we know, Kim Jong Un. There's really only one or two dominant political parties, and the party that elected him, now that he's in office and has been for a few years, his party becomes the dominant party, and I believe it's called the People's Party, something like that, which is kind of a misnomer because the people really don't have a lot of say in that political party, and much less the country. But that's what it's called, their party system. Dictatorships have one dominant party. They don't allow for political differences, and there's no choice and no real political debates happening because essentially they're not a free society. If there's only one dominant political party, the other ones are pushed out or suppressed. So they may exist, but they're not strong enough to have a competitive spirit or environment. So that's, you see countries like that around the world. There's not many now, but examples would be like the way Cuba used to be under Fidel Castro, and the way Saddam Hussein was in the 1980s and 90s when he was the president of Iraq. He was part of the political party there that was dominant. Obviously, that's not very desirable, so we have a multi-party system here throughout most of the rest of the world, like in the United Kingdom, Germany. There's different political parties that have all, they sort of vie for power in every election. They compete, and even when the dominant political party wins, the other ones are still able to, meet with. They're still able to have debates, and they're still welcome onto the into what they have is called Parliament. They don't have Congress, but Parliament's pretty similar to our Congress, and they're allowed to speak, and they're allowed to put forth bills and business items that they want the government to consider. So it's definitely more free thought. It's definitely more liberal, I guess you could say. But some problems here is it does lead to competition and conflict. So that is kind of I guess, a drawback. It's good to have debate, but sometimes it takes them a while to get things passed in the UK and in Germany and other places, France, a lot of European countries. They have what they call gridlock, where they're arguing about something, and then it takes days, weeks for some resolution to get passed because there's so many different competing interests. So I guess you could look at that as a con, as a drawback to having so much a voice or a free choice with all the different political parties that are in existence over there. Here, I should back up. Here in the United States, we really only have two dominant political parties. You guessed it, the Democrats and the Republicans. We do have a third party, the Independent Party, that's very strong, but not strong enough. They've put forth candidates before in prior elections. They've gotten on the ballot, and I think one year a third party candidate was allowed to debate, on the main debate stage, but I think that was Ross Perot back in 1992. Yeah, was it 1992 when Ross Perot, look him up, what a character that guy was. Guess where he was from? You guessed it, Texas. He was an oil tycoon, and he was a really good guy to quote. A lot of interesting things he said. But anyway, Ross Perot was an independent candidate, but obviously he lost to Bill Clinton in 1992. Bill Clinton, of course, being a Democrat. So in the United States, we only have two strong parties that are really sort of at the top. The other parties, the independent parties and others, they exist, but they just don't have enough power, haven't displayed enough power to actually be as relevant and win an election. Not a presidential election. They have won other elections, like state elections and at the city, county, and state level. If you look at the history of our country, there have been some third-party candidates who have won office. There's even some in the Senate. Bernie Sanders is an example of an independent candidate. He's a senator from, is it Rhode Island, Massachusetts, or New York? One of those. And I think it's Massachusetts. Anyway, so Bernie Sanders won election into the U.S. Senate. I want to say that was sometime in the 70s or 80s. It's been a while. And so he ran as an independent and he won. And he's held his office ever since. But he has switched his allegiance to the Democratic Party more recently because he's trying to run for president. So, although I think now he's dropped out of the race. Bye, Bernie. So anyway, his thoughts were, well, independents like me, third party candidates typically don't have a good chance at winning, because people are used to the two choices, Democrat, Republican. So he went ahead and filed to run as a Democrat, and he was doing pretty well this election cycle. He was gaining a lot of support, a lot of traction. His campaign was doing pretty well, but ultimately he has bowed out of the race. He bowed out a couple of weeks ago. He announced that he was dropping out, and he is now, just watching on the sidelines like the rest of us, because it looks like Joe Biden, the current Democratic presumptive nominee, he's probably going to obviously be the Democratic, choice for president. So that's how that goes. All right, I'm reading off the slides here. There's three types of parties. There's three types of political parties within Democrat or Republican. There's the two parties, but there's the third party, like the independents. Even with that, they are sort of broken down into these three categories, I should say. Let me rephrase it. There's three categories of third parties, and they look like this. There's a single issue party, a party that focuses only on one issue. These are going to be, the party, the pro-life, the environment, the Green Party. These are all political parties. They're not necessarily they're independent parties, but they don't call themselves the independent party because they're a single issue political focus. So, they are really, just like the name implies, they are the party that they are is what is in the name. So they're called the pro-life party, the environmental rights party, the Green Party, the legalize it now party. Gee, what do you think they're all about, right? So they just have like an issue that they care about, that they're really focused on, and they try to nominate candidates who solely focus on that issue. They might have other things on their agenda that they want to discuss and that they want to be about, but they're mostly identified by their name. That's a single issue or named party. The second one here we have is an ideological party. And if you are following along, or if you did pull up the slides, I'm on slide number 5. I probably should have said that. I'm just focusing on things that I think are interesting, guys, or at least informational. I'm not going to read all of them, but some of these I definitely want you to refocus on, to highlight. So let me highlight that now. The focus on the ideological party is to change society and improve it overall. In the U.S., these parties would be like the libertarian, the communist, or the socialist parties because they have a specific agenda or an ideology. They are all about changing having conversations about who we are as a country, who we are ideally as people, ideologically where do we fit in with the rest of the world, and they're a little bit more, or I'm sorry, they're a lot more focused just on that. It's a little hard to explain. I hope I'm conveying this accurately, but it's just they're focused on an idea and a particular platform. That's what makes them an ideological party. And the most famous ones, notable ones, are going to be like the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, right? They're independent parties, but they're not the main independent party that you think of. These are just little sub-independent parties that have a specific agenda. That's what makes them an ideological party. And the last one we'll talk about is the Splinter Party. The Splinter Party is made up of members of an existing party who branch out for one reason or another. I'll give you a great example. You have the Republican Party, and within the Republican Party, there's little independent parties under that. And an example of that would be the Tea Party. The Tea Party is a branch of the Republican Party, essentially, but they feel like the Republican Party has lost its focus. They feel like the mainstream, regular traditional Republican Party hasn't done and isn't doing enough to really promote the ideas of a Republican or conservative agenda or platform. So they broke off and formed the Tea Party. There's reasons why they're called that. They picked that name for a reason that I won't get into now. But if you ever hear Tea Party, if you ever hear that, I always envision people drinking tea. That's obviously like the name, but it's got nothing to do with that. It's got more to do with how they are a specific subset of the Republican Party. So is a Tea Party member also a member of the Republican Party? Yeah, that's very likely. But they identify themselves more as a splinter party of that. It's kind of like, on the flip side, it's kind of like if you're a Democrat, for example, but you still don't feel the Democratic Party on a national political level does enough, then you might be in a subgroup called the leftist, or the leftist party or the something like that, to where you're still a Democrat, but you are more liberal and more leftist than the mainstream Democratic party is. So you're part of a subset or a splinter party of that main party. I hope that makes sense. So what do third parties do? Independents and others. Well, they rarely win, so they're still important. They raise awareness about issues. They force the agenda. They force things to be talked about that otherwise might not, like minimum wage. Even though they don't win presidential elections typically, they're still very important because of the things that they bring to the national consciousness and awareness. But they're very important because at the state and local and county level, they can win elections, and in fact, they often do. And really, I've told you guys this before. Your vote in an election, in a presidential election, it does matter to some degree. I mean, it does, but it doesn't have as much impact as if you vote for the governor of your state or the mayor of your city. Those are things that impact you on a more real time, real sort of feel level. That because you live in that community, you live in that state, you live in that city, so the issues that are going on in your community, locally, are going to have more impact on your life and on your family's life and existence and business. So that's why I think it's important for you to vote in general, but particularly for the smaller, you know, from federal you get state, then you get local and county, or county and local. Those are the things that you should really focus on. I'm not saying you should still vote in presidential elections, but I don't think that has as much impact on your life, obviously, as the smaller ones. So an independent candidate could be running for governor. An independent candidate could be running for a school board position or a city council position. It happens all the time. And so you have a chance to vote for somebody like that. If you like their politics, if you like where they stand on the issues, you don't have to only vote Democrat, Republican, especially if an independent or third party candidate is running for office. So just something to consider. But again, continuing on with the slides, why do third parties typically struggle in presidential elections? Well, they have good ideas, but they have trouble winning elections, and here's why. They have trouble raising money because a lot of times people, mainstream agenda, or let me rephrase that, the average person, whoever he or she is, probably thinks that they're still all about the Democrat Republican spectrum. They can't see anything in between or anything else. So that kind of limits people's thinking, and if people are limited in their thinking, they can't really make an informed decision based on just anything other than Democrat Republican. So they don't want to give money to a candidate or support a candidate who's not either a Democrat or Republican. I hope that changes in the years to come. I myself consider myself, I've become an independent minded person. I used to be a Democrat, but I've sort of shifted my focus. I'm not in love with some of the things that the Democratic Party's done over the years. I'm sorry, that's probably another rant for another time. But my point is, there's a lot of people like me who have become more independent minded. So, I hope that more people become that. That's just my personal wish. But for the most part, as I said, the average American typically thinks in terms of Democrat and Republican. But that may be changing in years to come. I really believe that. But anyway, sorry for the ramble. I'm sorry. Political shit. Let's try that again. Independent candidates have trouble raising money because a lot of times people don't believe that they can really win. Independent candidates and third-party candidates have to collect signatures and file papers to be put on ballots. So they have to go through a couple of different hoops that they have to jump through before they can actually become a viable candidate and actually put their campaign in focus. They got to do other things to get their campaign on message and focused before they're taken seriously. They've got to collect signatures, file paperwork to even be put on the debate ballots, right? So they can't even enter a debate and share their ideas until they've gotten enough signatures and filed the right paperwork to do that. Democrats and Republicans don't have to do that at all. And finally, see if I can explain this. There's something called a winner-take-all system, which means that only one person can hold office. So, let me break that down for you. We only elect one governor. We only elect one mayor. We only elect one president. Only one obviously can hold office. In other countries, they do it a little differently. They base their you can have, not that they have two presidents or two prime ministers in a country, but part of their vote is divided up so that if I'll give you an example. If one of their candidates, let's pick on France, right? If in France somebody is elected in office from whatever party, they don't just have Democrats and Republicans there. I think it's their names or something else. But if somebody from, let's say, the Labour Party, I think that's one in France and in Great Britain, but in France they have the Labour Party, and that is a pretty important dominant party. If somebody from the Labour Party barely beats out somebody from the, let's say, Socialist Party, they're right here, the Labour Party candidate takes it, but the Socialist Party candidate got quite a few votes as well. He or she could then be appointed to an office that's below prime minister and still have influence in the way the country's governed, which is kind of cool, I think. It's progressive. We don't have that here in the United States. It's when our president, whoever he is, let's use the most current example. When Donald Trump became president as a Republican, he appointed and he ran with a vice president who was also a Republican. When they won, that's it. There's nothing else that the Democratic candidate at that time, Hillary Clinton, though she did get a lot of votes, not enough for the Electoral College. I'll explain that in another time. But she got a lot of votes, but because we have winner take all, even if it was this close, here's Trump, here's Clinton, and they both got a lot of votes. Trump just happened to get a little bit more, but she got millions of votes. Even that notwithstanding, it doesn't matter because it's winner take all in this country, as far as the president, as far as the governor, and how those things are. I'm sorry. Here's my phone going off here. Just turn that off. Does that make sense? Here in our country, we only have one person who can win it all. In other countries, it's not like that. So that's a challenge for third-party political parties. That's why they have trouble, because it's kind of it's very demoralizing to do all that work and get very little percentage of the vote, and then you're tossed away, and so you have no influence on how the government's run. Unless you have to win it all, you have to win office in order to affect any change, and so that's a difficult thing for third parties to do. All right, so I'm going to skip a couple of things that talk about elections. I'm going to kind of skip a lot of this actually. I just want to maybe close off here with discussing what does it mean to be a Democrat or a Republican or an independent. What exactly do those things sort of speak to? What I'd like to recall or make you sort of recall is this: you are allowed to be whatever you want in this country. We know that, right? That's the freedom of America, and I think that's great. As far as your politics goes, you don't have to ever justify your political stance to anybody. It's a free country. So if you want to be a Republican because your dad and your granddad was a Republican, and you want your kids to be raised as that, that's absolutely cool. It's great. But whatever political ideology you prescribe or you're prescribed to, I want you to be able to understand why you believe that, why you are a hardcore Republican or Democrat. Being able to articulate those views on social media or on Facebook or whatever, not that you have to, but when you can explain to people where you're coming from, what your background is, and why you believe in the way you do, that's a lot more effective when you're arguing or when you're debating somebody than just, I'm a Republican, and that's all there is to it. If you don't like it, go blank yourself. That doesn't lend itself to very spirited, very engaged, good dialogue, right? Same thing for a Democrat. If you're a Democrat, you should be able to state why. You should be able to. You should know what your core beliefs are. Whatever you believe, you should have a good intellectual background for why you believe that, and you can state that, not just, well, my daddy was a Republican, so therefore I'm always Republican, because it's all about guns. You can't take away my guns. Sorry, a little stereotypical, but Republicans actually believe so much more. There's so much more, in depth than I think what the liberal media might make them out to be. Anyway, so let me kind of talk about that now real quick. What does it mean to be each? It typically, a lot of you know this already, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I would say this. If you are a Democrat, you believe that government should be expanded and it should be big enough to where government should meet the needs of the many, not just the few. You typically believe that healthcare is an important issue and maybe even a right that everybody should be entitled to. you want to help the poor, and you're willing to spend government resources and money on training people and working towards eliminating poverty and things like that. And those are all noble things, and those are great things. But here's the other side of it, and there's more to it, but that's just kind of a nutshell what most mainstream Democrats believe. Republicans, by the same token, they want to improve society for the better as well. But they feel that big government and spending a lot of money in government on those programs may not be the best thing. Typically, a Republican, and really a conservative Republican, as if there's any other kind, well, there are actually, but a typical Republican, or what you might say a conservative or conservative Republican, believes that society should be improved. It's the right thing to do, but we can look at churches, we can look at schools, we can look at nonprofit, but also private organizations to take the load off of government and to really help out. So, let me throw this out there. Let's say somebody loses their job. Somebody working in the oil field or whatever, which is experiencing a really bad downturn right now, and gas prices are low. Good for us, but not so great if you work in the oil field and petrochemical industry. So keep them in your thoughts. But a lot of people losing work or downshifting their productivity. A lot of people are being laid off. Anyway, so a Republican would say, well, that person should see what resources they have. Maybe visit their local church or a nonprofit organization that can maybe help them find work in another field, right? And that's good. That's a good response. That's a good way to solve the problem. But a Democrat might say, well, yes, that's great if he can find some other work, but we got to help that person out now. We got to give them money. We've got to put unemployment. They need to file for unemployment, and they need to be able to get unemployment. So we've got two kind of competing different things. A Republican wouldn't say that person doesn't deserve unemployment. He wouldn't say that necessarily, but he might say, well, before we tap into all these people needing unemployment, is there some kind of a local program that can help out these people? Is there something that the church is doing? Is there something that a nonprofit agency is doing that can help them out before we tap into our government, budget to pull monies and budget resources to help out, these people who are out of work? That's just kind of a simplified version of it, guys. There's gray area in between that I'm not really discussing right now, but I'll just wrap it up with this. Typically, a Republican wants to help people as well, but they have a different way of going about it. They have a different idea, and it's not just government, and throw money at the problem, and just whatever these people need, they should be able to get, even if we have to raise taxes, right? They typically don't like taxes. They like taxes to be low, and they want other agencies to help them out. A Democrat typically is okay with raising taxes a little bit, or even a lot, depending on who you talk to, because there are debates on that even within the Democratic Party. So there's just a difference of opinion on how we should go about solving these social ills of this country, right? Do we raise taxes? Do we make government more involved? Do we have more government regulation and get into people's lives, quote, for the better? That's kind of a view of the Democrats or Republicans and conservatives. Do we let's allow private industries to see if we can help these people out? Let's see if there are churches or organizations locally that can help people find jobs or get them health coverage at work, health insurance, and things like that. They both want the same things. I think at the core, I think both have the right attitude and vibe of helping people, but how they want to go about it is markedly different. And there's some slides that I have here on this PowerPoint that kind of highlight that even more. There's so many issues like gun control, abortion, and there's just quite a few others that you can read about in the slides later as you go through this, and it kind of highlights the differences. I'm probably rambling way more than I should now, but I think I've kind of made some points, and I hope you can, I hope I've left you with some information to think about. Do some more research on your own beyond just these slides. If you really want to know what the difference is between a Democrat, Republican, or independent and others, feel free to look that stuff up, guys. It's the beauty of living in the internet age, right? You can look this information up, and I may post another video that maybe goes in a little bit more detail about maybe reflectively asking you, what do you think you are? Or if you know what you are as far as these political spectrums, why do you believe that? Why are you a hardcore liberal? What issues matter to you that make you identify with one party. And maybe you're an independent like me who doesn't believe in either party, but you do believe in something. You do have views about politics, the economy, and the world at large, and how we can solve all these problems that we have. Maybe I'll wrap it up with this. I promise, the last statement. Maybe you have an attitude and opinion about how the government should be handling the COVID pandemic that neither party has really expressed, or that the government isn't really saying much on. Maybe you've got some thoughts on that, and that's because of how you believe or what you believe, and I'd be willing to hear that. So maybe we might do a Zoom meeting maybe later this week or next week, and we can kind of explore that. Maybe I'll be thinking about that. But for now, I hope you are well, wishing you well, and wishing you good thoughts and a positive outcome to all this madness. I hope it soon ends. You guys take care. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.